have been facing settler colonialism, ethnic cleansing, occupation, invasion, murder of civilians, destructions of homes and hospitals, along with the suffocating humanitarian and economic control by Israel, backed by the US, UK, and other Western powers. The same forces that support the Saudi-UAE-led aggression on Yemen, that has destabilized the country and eroded our food supplies and created the worst humanitarian crisis of the century. Since the conflict in Ukraine began about 2 months ago, we've seen how the media romanticized Ukrainian resistance and in the same breath demonize Palestinian, Yemeni, and other resistance movements throughout the world. If we can learn anything from the Palestinian struggle, it is their relentless resistance to injustice, occupation, ethnic cleansing, military invasions, and Western hegemony. The Yemeni people have always loved and supported the Palestinian movement, but felt it personally when they had to defend themselves against military attack, regional aggression, Western intervention, and violation of their country's sovereignty. There are so many similarities between the Palestinian struggle and the military aggression inside of Yemen. When it comes to the Palestinian and Yemeni cause, you tend to hear that it's Palestinians and Yemenis, respectively, are killing each other, or that it's complicated. But what's complicated about the fourth largest military in the world stealing the homes of Palestinians, terrorizing civilians, taking over their land and their places of worship during the holiest month of the year? Or they frame what's happening in Palestine as clashes or evictions. It removes the oppressor, the source of the devastation, to whitewash and downplay the gruesome acts of the settler colonial Israeli state. Similarly, in Yemen, when reporting a massacre by the Saudi-UAE-led coalition, the headline often reads, 50 people died. Yemen is starving, instead of saying the Saudi-UAE-led coalition bombed a supermarket killing 50 people, or Yemen is being starved by the Saudi-UAE-imposed blockade. Again, it removes the oppressor from the picture. They use passive language. This is very intentional. It is to continue oppressing the victims, which in this case Yemenis and Palestinians, and strip us of any claims to international justice. Because we all know language matters. We've seen how language and the framing of the conflict in Ukraine led to international support and economic, social, and political boycotts. They've made heroes out of the Ukrainian people resisting Russian intervention, and terrorists of Palestinians who defend themselves and their land from occupation, invasion, and ethnic cleansing for more than 70 years. The conflict in Ukraine has exposed the hypocritical double standards of the West. For decades, they've tried to manipulate us with the words to believe that the villagers with stones are a threat to one of the most militarized occupations in the world, backed with billions of dollars in military arms from the US. That sounds familiar? That's because the US also supports the Saudi-UAE-led coalition. The United States has made billions of dollars in arms sales to the Saudi-UAE-led coalition since it began its military assault on Yemen in 2015. Occupation, settler colonialism, military aggression, destruction of homes, schools, hospitals, and misery of innocent people is a well-fueled machine that generates lots of money. And people's lives, specifically Black, brown, and Arab and indigenous people of the world, have low currency, unfortunately. And in the decade following September 11, military spending increased 50%. In comparison, on every other non-military programs, things like education, healthcare, public transit, and science grew by only 13.5% over the same period. In 2018 alone, U.S. defense spending was $732 billion. That's more than 10 countries combined. This is annually 16% of the federal budget that we taxpayers pay for. And the biggest beneficiaries by country miles were Lockheed Martin, that made $36.2 billion. Boeing, $24.3 billion. Raytheon, $12.8 billion. General Dynamics, that made $12.7 billion. These are bomb makers that land on Palestinian and Yemeni homes. They also provide equipment to Israel to maintain the occupation and terrorization of Palestinians. Whether it's a private prison industry here in the U.S., or occupation or military expansion in the East, systems of oppression are ruled by the same people. But we have us, we have each other, we are more than them, and together we can dismantle these systems that oppress black and brown people in the U.S., in Palestine, in Kashmir, Afghanistan, Somalia, Yemen, the Philippines, Venezuela, and everywhere else that there is oppression. I will leave you with the last comments. May Allah punish the oppressors, whoever they are, and help the oppressed wherever they are. Imam Ali alayhi salam once said, the day that justice is brought to the oppressor is much more severe than the day oppression is done unto the oppressed. Assalamu alaikum and free Palestine.
Thank you so much, Kathar. Our next speaker is a young poet and activist, and her name is Sayyida.
Assalamu alaikum. So inshallah, I'll be reading an English poem.